What's up, friends, and welcome back to my channel. So in this video, I'm going to be talking all things Joovv and red light therapy. The good, the bad, and everything in between. Full disclosure, I was sent this Joovv Solo device behind me about 4 months ago, and I've been using it pretty much every day since I got it. So in this video, I'm gonna give you the full lowdown on how this device works, my anecdotal experience using it. I'll talk about some of the hype behind red light therapy and why not all scientists are fully on board yet. And then finally, I'm gonna share with you my honest thoughts on who should actually buy this device. However, unlike a lot of other reviewers out there where maybe the YouTuber in my shoes is gonna try to get you to stick around to the end for their final verdict on whether you should or should not buy this device, I'm gonna skip that. I'm just gonna straight up tell you that right now. You should probably not buy this device or any red light device for that matter. I mean, after poring over the research, I've found that some of the purported benefits are kind of inconclusive at best. And after my own personal extensive self-experimentation, I really found that the device had no major impact on some of my biomarkers or other health stats. I don't think this product is gonna move the needle on your health for 99% of people. And there are a dozen of other ways you can spend $1,500 to have an even bigger impact on your health. Now, that being said, if price is not a concern, and my words somehow haven't dissuaded you from wanting to give red light a try, well, then buckle up, because this is going to be the most comprehensive review of the Joovv Solo device that I can possibly muster. So let's start with some of the core features you get with the Joovv Solo device, which, by the way, is one of their targeted red light devices. It's not their full body, and it does retail for around $1,400. So specs wise, it's about 9 inches wide and 3 feet tall. So if I'm standing right in front of it, that pretty much covers everything from the waist down. In terms of settings, you have 2 options for programming your sessions. You can do it either directly off the device or through the Joovv app. Starting with the device, and on the panel itself, this button actually turns the device on and off, and then this one allows you to start and pause each session. The stopwatch icon controls the timing with a max limit of 20 minutes. In the bottom section, you can toggle through the different forms of light, either just red, just near infrared, or a combo of both. And then this final button on the bottom right corner turns on their recovery mode, which simply means the near infrared light is going to start pulsing continuously at a rate of 10 Hertz. According to Joovv's website, these 10 Hertz pulsations are really designed to allow wavelengths of near infrared light to basically penetrate deeper into the body and therefore enhance your deeper muscle recovery. So super interesting concept, but I'm gonna wait to see a little bit more research emerge on this before I say anything else about that right now. Now the panel itself, it's pretty straightforward, but there are actually a couple of additional light options when you open up their companion app. On their homepage, you'll see this sun icon, and you can actually choose from their standard, the near infrared, the red, or the split combo I talked about. But in addition to this, there's actually a 4th option called Ambient mode, which you can set at some different intensity levels ranging from low to high. This is actually the frequency going on right behind me, so I could actually see this being pretty useful to use at night, especially if you're looking for an alternative to some of the bright overhead fluorescent lights that you might have in your house, especially if you don't have Hue bulbs installed. And the bonus is that unlike the other settings, you can actually keep this ambient mode on for up to 90 minutes, and you'll find that configuration in their timer mode. Now, moving on to lighting. And as with most red light or photobiomodulation devices on the market, these Joovv panels, as I mentioned, come with a mix of both the red and the near infrared LEDs. So the red you see, the near infrared you don't. At times it's gonna appear like only half the panel is lit, but that's really just because near infrared light is thermal and so can't really be perceived by the human eye. But in terms of the actual wavelengths of light, the industry standard seems to be 660 nanometers for red and then 850 nanometers for near infrared light. Most of the companies in the space are meeting that criteria, and Joovv is certainly no exception. But the wavelengths alone do not equate high quality device. What you really want to be looking for, at least according to some of the red light experts in the space, is both power density, or the total wattage, and your panel size, which is basically how big of a surface area you can treat in one single session. So taking those two factors into account, then how does the Joovv stack against some of the competition? Well, for panel size, it's pretty much right in line with some of the other big competitors out there like Mito Red and Platinum LED, all of which are kind of coming in around that 3 feet tall, 9-inch wide mark to cover half the body. Then we have to look at power density, or what some companies are calling optical iridescence. And all this basically means is that the higher the power output, the further the light can actually penetrate the body. I think a lot of people are getting all hung up on the whole milliwatts per centimeter squared thing, myself included, but I didn't have a spectrometer at the time of this review, and so I'm going to hold off talking about that at least for now. But what I can say though is that most of the reputable companies that you're gonna find out there are working within similar ranges of power density. So some are gonna be a little bit stronger than others, but all that really means is that you can just sit a little bit further away from the device for a shorter duration of time. I gotta say, the ranges you'll find online are kind of vague. So I went with 6 to 10 inches away from the Joovv for around 20 minutes per day and found that that worked just fine for me. Now, I'm gonna address a little bit more about the mistakes I made around overdosing red light therapy in just a sec, but if you do want to dive deeper into this stuff, I think there's a tremendous resource out there. It's Ari Witten's book, The Ultimate Guide to Red Light Therapy. This thing is dense, it's packed with a lot of experiments, and so if you guys want to check out that, I'll link it up for you in the show notes below. Turning now to the science behind red light therapy. And I'll start out by saying that while there is a ton of research being done on various forms of light therapies out there, this is still a pretty rapidly growing field. And so as a result, some of the information that we have today may change as more data emerges. So just a little caveat there. So probably one of the biggest, or at least most vocal proponents in the space right now is Michael Hamblin. And he's an associate professor at Harvard Medical School. He's got 400 published peer-reviewed papers on the subject and over a decade of actual hands-on research using low-level light therapy. I will also mention that he does sit on the scientific advisory board for Joovv, but his research into red light started way before the company did. That being said, he does stand by some of the most popular claims out there around this type of technology as it relates to things like lowering inflammation, aiding in some of the treatments for autoimmune conditions, skin health, collagen synthesis, and fat loss reduction. But for Hamblin, the area with the greatest potential application and health benefits, for him, that's the brain, specifically as it relates to things like improving cognitive performance, helping with memory and sleep, and even emotional regulation. So you can check out all of his work in some of these case studies in the show notes below. Now, despite the 5,000 or so peer-reviewed studies that have been published so far, there are still a couple of pretty prominent scientific thought leaders that have been noticeably absent from the conversations around red light therapy. And the people I'm talking about here are Rhonda Patrick, Peter Attia, and Andrew Huberman. Now, I would argue that all three of them are very much dialed into the space of biohacking and alternative medicine. So then why not throw their support behind red light technology? And it appears the issue has less to do with the quantity of data and much more to do with the quality of the studies done so far. And by quality, this refers to a large enough randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled sample size for testing, human subjects versus lab mice, and then a series of publications coming out of blue ribbon scientific journals. Because let's be honest, it's not that hard to get your paper up on PubMed these days. And for the most part, people like Patrick and Huberman would argue, and they do argue, that natural sunlight is probably the most effective form of light therapy anyway. So that is kind of where the science and the research on all of that stands right now. Again, the scientific literature could change, their thoughts could change, and so I'm gonna keep you guys posted on everything I find out when all of that potentially unfolds. So now that we've covered the science, the settings, the functions, all that stuff, let's talk about what it's actually like to use the red light device. I'll tell you about my experience and some of the mistakes I made early on in testing this thing out. So most red light companies, including Joovv, do recommend treatment sessions once a day, usually ranging 10 to 20 minutes, and about 6 to 18 inches away from the device, depending of course on the area you're treating. I read that and I thought, well, more must be better. So I ended up spending anywhere between an hour to 2 hours a day with the red light shining on me while I worked. Big mistake. I later did a little digging and found out about this concept of biphasic dosing, which basically means more of it might actually cancel out all the good effects that you could potentially get from a shorter treatment time. Now, I will say for some people, too much red light therapy has even shown to cause fatigue or sometimes headaches. But for me, I just didn't feel any changes to my energy level whatsoever. Since then, I have scaled way back on those treatment times and have really stuck to their 10 to 15 minute, maybe 20-minute protocol to a T. And that has definitely helped a little bit more. But it still really hasn't moved the needle for me in the ways that I guess I was expecting or even hoping. I think it might not have to do anything with the company, but more with a couple of different factors that are actually beyond my control. So if you happen to fall into one of these categories and you too are on the fence about red light therapy, you definitely might want to just take these two things into account before investing a couple $100 or $1,000 into a device like this. So number one being, you get ample sunshine every single day. Now, granted, we've been living on an island in Hawaii for the past 8 months, and so I'm typically getting on average like maybe 3 to 4 hours of natural sunlight every single day. Given this prolific amount of light exposure I'm getting from the sun, a device like this sort of seems superfluous to me, especially since I don't really have any injuries or skin issues I'm trying to address. I say that as we are also in the process of moving back to Northern California for the winter. So that's gonna mean colder days, a heck of a lot less sunshine. Could my relationship with this device change? Possibly. I just don't know yet, but I'm excited to test these things out. And you guys know I will make sure I will report back on this in a couple of months after I've done my due diligence. So make sure you stay tuned for that. The second factor I'd take into consideration is, are you relatively healthy? Obviously, this is a very loaded statement. I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of backlash from this, but let's just say that you've had your biomarkers checked, they look good. You've got your sleep, your diet, your fitness routines dialed in, and you generally have great energy and feel relatively healthy from day to day. Well, the chances are that the effects of red light therapy might not be that profound. This may be a strange analogy, but say you're a regular coffee drinker and one morning you have a second cup of coffee. You're probably not gonna feel the effects of that second cup as much as say a non-coffee drinker would feel from just drinking 1 cup of coffee. If we go off this theory that red light is working on your mitochondria to help produce more ATP energy within the cells, then the effects of red light on people in really good health with strong mitochondrial function is gonna kind of be like that second cup of coffee for a regular coffee drinker. Whereas people dealing with some type of autoimmune condition, say something like Hashimoto's or weakened mitochondrial function, they might actually feel more of the energy inducing effects, kind of like that first cup of coffee for a non-coffee drinker. Taking all of that into account, you may be asking yourself, well, then why still use the device every single day if you aren't feeling the effects? Great question. And for me, a lot of it simply has to do with habit reinforcement, specifically around meditating. Sometimes I do struggle from time to time with taking that time to meditate for 15 to 20 minutes a day. And even though I know about all the benefits and it does really feel good when I'm done, sometimes it just takes a little bit of momentum to get me there. So enter red light, and I actually found that pairing my meditations in tandem with the warm red light has been really enjoyable, and therefore my compliance has actually been a lot higher. I'll also mention that I've been finding myself using the Joovv more and more with the times of the month where I may be dealing with a little extra cramping or bloating. I'm not saying it cancels out all the pain completely, but I have found it to be pretty effective, at least at managing the pain in the moment. And finally, sweet God, let's talk about the pros and cons of the Joovv 3.0 and who I think this device is actually meant for. On the plus side, this device is super lightweight and it is pretty easy to move around from the stand to the floor. It's about 14 pounds, which is actually a lot lighter than some of the other devices I've seen of similar size on the market. And the overall construction is also pretty sound. I like that you have the option to program it either straight from the device or using the Joovv app. The whole thing also comes pre-assembled with very little work required to set it up, so that was a huge plus for me. And it also seems to have pretty great light intensity, although I haven't yet tested it with a spectrometer. That will be my next review. But I can say for certain that it is certainly more powerful than some of the cheaper red light squares that I've talked about in the past. And bonus, you do get a pair of protective glasses included with your device, which are surprisingly comfortable and do a really great job at blocking out the light. Now, in terms of EMFs, the good news is I did find that the readings were relatively low when I tested the device out with my acoustometer. If you're standing at least 6 to 10 inches away from the device, both the magnetic and the electric field ratings were really hovering on the lower end. So not a cause of concern for me at this point. And for what it's worth, I have to give the company credit for the prolific amount of research that they have done on red light therapy so far. I mean, yes, they have probably spent a ton of money on marketing, but a good chunk of that has also been funneled into educational tools as well. I mean, on their website, they've put together a database of more than 1,000 clinical studies on light therapy, and they really do keep their blog up to date with some of the latest studies and developments in the red light space. So it's impressive. It's something I haven't seen a lot of other companies do. I would personally prefer to invest money into a company that's reinvesting that money into research and just trying to make this kind of information and technology more accessible to people. Now, moving on to the downsides, and I think we should start with some of the minor mechanical stuff. I mean, for one, this device does make some noise. It's not super loud, but you will hear the fans running in the background during your sessions. For now, I'd say it's definitely quieter than my AC unit, but some of those other smaller targeted devices I've had in the past, yeah, it's a lot louder than those. Next up is form factor. Right now, you have to either sit up or stand right in front of the device, which in my opinion isn't exactly relaxing. I mean, I would much prefer lying down during these red light sessions without having to invest, like $100K in one of those massive red light beds. So I'm hoping that maybe in the future they'll come out with some type of horizontal stand. Remains to be seen. Anyway, just something to note if you're gonna buy one of these things. And finally, let's talk about the price. Yes, Joovv is still one of the most expensive red light devices on the market to date, but is it worth the money? And I'd have to say it really does depend. Based on where I'm living right now and the amount of sunlight I get each day, this device, and frankly, any of the other red light devices on the market, kind of seems like a bit of an overkill. But if you don't have access to a ton of natural light, and say you're using this type of device to help with something very specific, say Hashimoto's or something thyroid related, you might find a device like this worth every damn penny. Now, when we talk about price, we also have to talk about construction and design. And I do think that the Joovv, without even having tested some of the other devices on the market, just from what I know and what I've seen, I think that they do outperform the competition on at least a couple of different fronts right now, including the sizing. It's super lightweight. It's really easy to assemble. It does come with a more dynamic mounting system than some others I've seen, and it also can double as a secondary light source because of the ambient mode functionality. Now, that being said, I probably still wouldn't recommend everyone dole out $1,400 for one of these devices. I mean, if you do have the money and you want a device that is high quality, super aesthetic, yes, the Joovv is a no-brainer. It's kind of like the Cadillac of red light devices in my opinion. But if you're just looking for something simple or a little bit more basic to start, the market is ripe with a ton of lower end options that might just fit better into your budget. I certainly look forward to having a chance to test out those devices in the near future, compare them with the Joovv, and then report back on everything that I discover. But that's kind of where I stand right now on the Joovv device and red light therapy in general. If after all of this, you are still committed to buying the Joovv, well, I've gone ahead and included my affiliate discount code in the show notes below. If you use that code, awesome. Thank you. It definitely helps support the growth of this channel. And if you find a better one out there, then please, by all means, go and use that. I know the holidays are coming up. There's probably going to be some sales. I don't know about that for certain. Do not hold me accountable. Anyway, thank you guys again so much. If you like this video, if you learned something, you know what to do. Until then, I cannot wait to catch you on the next one.